Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Tonight, we're on the verge of the nation's largest ever healthcare workers' strike. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. More than 75,000 Kaiser workers across the country could walk off the job on Wednesday, including a few thousand here in San Diego. As KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman tells us, negotiations are still underway at this hour.
Months of negotiations between Kaiser Permanente and a coalition of unions from across multiple states have yet to produce a new contract that could result in the largest healthcare worker strike in U.S. history.
Our main focus here is our staffing crisis at Kaiser, and if we can get an agreement in place that really addresses that, then we are more than happy to avoid going on strike on Wednesday.
There's 4,500 Kaiser San Diego workers represented by OPEIU Local 30. The union includes ultrasound technicians, certified nursing assistants, housekeepers, and pharmacy techs, among others. Negotiations have been ongoing since April.
Our membership is, they're tired, they're exhausted, they're burned out, they're leaving the healthcare industry, and it is impacting the quality of care that they're able to provide for our patients.
Local Kaiser officials have pushed back on the notion of understaffing. They maintain operations are within state requirements, and they're adding thousands of new jobs.
I really hope that these executives over the next 36 hours come to the table in good faith and we can get something done.
Without a deal, workers would go on strike from Wednesday morning to Saturday morning. Kaiser officials say they're continuing to negotiate, but should a strike happen,
our hospitals will remain open, our emergency departments remain open, and in many cases, our services will continue. We are focused on high quality care, having no disruption to that. If there are any disruptions, they should be minimal.
Kaiser says their latest offer includes raises and a $23 an hour minimum wage in California starting in 2024.
We think 12% over 4 years, 12 to 14% across our markets is more than fair, and it keeps us above the market, keeps us among the best in the industry.
The coalition of unions is pushing for more.
You have to invest in the people who care for your patients.
Outside of compensation, Kaiser officials say they have come to tentative agreements in other areas, but barring a new contract, workers will strike Wednesday. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
San Diego County water officials say the region should have plenty of water in the coming year, even though there's concern about water in the Colorado River Basin. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson has details.
The region shouldn't have to worry about a shortage of water. The San Diego County Water Authority says local customers are reaping the benefits of decades of effort to diversify and secure water supplies.
Because we've invested, we've done the work in our infrastructure, in our reliability, and in conservation. As a county, we've been conserving water for over 35 years, and we've reduced water use by 50%. Those are incredible numbers, and that is what keeps us really reliable.
But even with the Carlsbad desalination plant, which can generate 50 million gallons of drinking water a day, the Water Authority says more than 60% of the region's potable water still comes from the Colorado River. Most of that water comes from a transfer deal with the Imperial Irrigation District. Meanwhile, the Colorado River Basin is in the midst of a mega drought, and that could force federal officials to cut back how much water flows to California, Nevada, and Arizona. There are voluntary cutbacks in place, but they don't affect San Diego. Any mandatory cutbacks would have a local impact.
If there was an actual cutback, not a voluntary reduction, but if there was an actual cutback to Imperial Irrigation District supplies, we would share in approximately 6.5% of that, so a very small percent.
This year's rain helped ease the pressure, but federal officials say they're ready to reduce allocations if persistent dry weather in the west continues drawing down the levels of Lake Mead and Lake Powell. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Well, we do have some cooler air still in place after that somewhat cool weekend. In fact, it was a downright cool weekend for the inland areas. And tonight we're still back down around 44 in Campo, 43 Mount Laguna, 47 in Ramona, and then 52 at Oceanside, but 59 into San Diego. Well, we are going to be looking at a rebound. Temperatures recovering, fewer clouds as well. So stay with us here as in just a little bit we're going to break down the forecast details. We'll also check reservoir levels.
We're about to see another barrier broken in the U.S. Senate. Governor Gavin Newsom has appointed LaFonza Butler to fill the seat left vacant by the death of Senator Dianne Feinstein. Kyung-la lays out what this means for the heated Senate race that was already underway.
Because our story is the story of how when women win, we all win.
Seated next to her young daughter and wife, California's future Senator LaFonza Butler, speaking then as the head of Emily's List.
Young women, older women, all women. This is where our power lies.
Butler, who has roots in California's most powerful unions, moves from the advocacy world to the U.S. Senate as California's Governor Gavin Newsom appoints his longtime Democratic ally to fill the late Dianne Feinstein seat.
Our bodies belong to us. Our freedoms are not up for debate.
In appointing Butler to the Senate, Newsom fulfills a promise to select a black woman. Since Kamala Harris left in 2021 to serve as vice president, there have been no black women serving in the chamber. Newsom also avoids a political pickle, with 3 congressional Democrats already running for the Senate seat. Adam Schiff, Katie Porter, and Barbara Lee, who had lobbied publicly to be Newsom's choice.
Of course, it would have been great because I did want to fill the vacancy if in fact that occurred. But listen, we all have to just focus on what we're doing, and I'm running very seriously.
Newsom's office says Butler's appointment comes without any strings attached, so she can run or not run for the Senate seat in 2024. Before she's even been sworn in, some Democrats say she should not.
I just think it's terribly unfair that she would do so. And the word around here is that whomever he appointed would not run. And to be airdropped into this is simply not fair. And by the way, I don't think many people know her.
Butler has 4 months before California's primary to change that as the sitting senator. Only the 3rd black woman in U.S. history and the 1st black lesbian to openly serve in the U.S. Senate.
I like to think of it as an embarrassment of riches. There are so many talented black women who've never had a shot at being in the Senate. And we hope that behind the scenes, as the dust settles, that we will as a movement, figure out who to get behind and get a path to victory here in California so that black women are represented in the long term.
Kyung-la reporting. Butler lived here in California for about 20 years, and she moved to Maryland in 2021 to lead Emily's List and registered to vote there in 2022. Governor Newsom's office says Butler has already re-registered to vote in California. The clock is ticking again to avoid a government shutdown. A funding bill passed over the weekend bought Congress 45 days to come up with a long-term plan. But now, as Mike Valerio reports, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is facing a new set of challenges.
A government shutdown averted for now.
We're going to be right back in this place in November.
Down-to-the-wire negotiations led to bipartisan passage of a stopgap funding measure, keeping the government open through November 17th.
A needless crisis will have been averted.
The bill includes natural disaster aid and a measure to keep the Federal Aviation Administration operational. Notably absent, additional funding for border security and funding for Ukraine, an issue dividing House Republicans.
There is no way that we can abandon Ukraine.
I tell you, that's not a mission the American people support.
And now, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's future is on the line. His decision to put a bipartisan bill on the floor has painted a target on his back.
It is becoming increasingly clear who the Speaker of the House already works for, and it's not the Republican conference.
Representative Matt Gaetz is among the hardline conservatives threatening to move to oust the California Republican. The unprecedented move would paralyze the House of Representatives and jeopardize the chance of passing a long-term funding bill before the deadline. McCarthy says he's ready for the fight.
Bring it on, let's get over with it, and let's start governing.
I'm Mike Valerio reporting.
It's National Banned Book Week, and organizations throughout San Diego are bringing attention to book censorship in schools and libraries. But as KPBS reporter Tanya Thorne tells us, it comes after one North County school district closed its libraries.
The American Library Association reports seeing a surge in book censorship attempts in recent years. So they have declared the first week of October as Banned Books Week. Libraries and organizations throughout San Diego will be holding events to educate the community about book censorship. Like Renee Tarver with the North San Diego County Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority.
This is a social action issue all over the country, and people don't seem to understand the gravity of this situation.
She says many of the books being challenged aim to erase uncomfortable but important American history.
Eventually, there will be no history except what people tell us happened that didn't happen.
The sorority will be hosting virtual events throughout the week on book censorship.
What banned books are about, what options people have to fight the censorship, because you can fight censorship. So we're doing that because the opposition to this is a well-organized machine, and we've been reactionary. So we want to not be reactionary. We want educated community, and we want the community to know how they can fight back.
Californians could be seeing less book censorship after Governor Gavin Newsom signed a bill that forbids book bans in schools. It also prohibits school boards from banning instructional materials based on racial or LGBTQ+ topics. But how that plays out has yet to be determined, because just last week, Escondido Union School District closed all of their libraries for a book audit. In a statement, Superintendent Luis Ibarra said the district has temporarily suspended library services to allow our library media technicians to conduct a thorough audit of our library collection. He stated that a book containing sexually explicit material was in one of the school libraries. The title of the book, found in one of the K-8 schools, was not provided. More details will be released following the audit that could keep libraries closed until the end of this week. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
San Diego scientists are advancing an effort to turn plants into allies in the battle to slow global warming. Researchers at the Salk Institute of Biological Studies are working to turn the world's major crops into carbon capture superheroes. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson has details.
And so here you can see a fully grown pennycress plant.
Wolfgang Busch holds up a transparent pot full of pennycress roots. He's leading the effort to figure out how plants with deep root systems can help slow global warming.
So plants are, the world record holders in getting carbon dioxide out of the air that causes the greenhouse effect and thereby climate change, and they grow everywhere.
And some plants are particularly efficient at transforming that carbon into stems, leaves, and roots. The root systems have the attention of researchers who see this trait as a key to getting carbon out of the air and stored in the ground.
Now, the deeper you put that carbon in the root system, the slower the decomposition gets. So carbon that is below 30 centimeters, below a foot in the soil, is much more stable, will hang around much longer in the soil. So by putting more and more of the root material at the deeper in the deeper soil layers will allow this carbon to stay there in the soil to store this carbon for longer.
Bush says researchers have already identified more than 100 genes that guide the creation of deep and robust root systems. They hope to either breed those traits into crops or use modern gene splicing technology to give those abilities to the most commonly grown plants.
If you just take, 5 major crops, the most prevalent crops, and you would pool their growth area, it would cover the whole subcontinent of India. It's like so much soil being covered by these plants, and even though even if a plant will do very little on its own, the massive scale of agriculture can make a dramatic impact.
The Harnessing Plants initiative was an idea germinated by Salk researcher Joanne Corey. She thinks new and improved plants can increase crop yields, boost soil quality, and scrub carbon out of the air.
I think we could take out 10 gigatons by this method. That's not the whole amount we need to take out every year, but we could make a big contribution to the whole.
10 gigatons is about a quarter of the carbon dioxide that humans put into the air each year. One particular plant of interest is Typha, cattails. The plant is robust and it produces a prodigious amount of seeds.
It's one of the 3 species that grows almost in all wetlands. And we find it as a primary species in some of the wetlands here that we're interested in restoring.
Michael handles a mature cattail plant with a tightly wound ball of roots.
And the roots grow so fast. This is an amazing plant. It's like a machine sucking up nutrients.
He says the plant is one of the best at moving carbon into a corked molecule known as suberin. Michael is trying to isolate the genetic characteristics that allow cattails to do that, and the hope is those abilities can be transferred to other plants.
They grab onto the surrounding substrate and they build. So they are basically building land, and you can see that they're sort of tight, and this is actually what's capturing the carbon, and this becomes oxygen free.
And sealing out oxygen keeps the roots from decomposing. It essentially locks the carbon inside the root ball. 2 years of sequencing Typha genomes has pointed researchers in encouraging directions, but the goal of an army of plants fighting global warming remains decades away.
There are a lot of recent events that suggest that we need to be moving fast. And some of the solutions that we're talking about are 10, 20 years out. But we need to be working on them now, because this is really what technology is really about, right? We need to be working on every angle. So not just, carbon scrubbers, but how do we use plants? We need to cut down on emissions. All of these solutions come together.
The idea's promise has attracted plenty of supporters. Energy companies like the Hess Corporation and Sempra Energy are investing money. So is the Bezos Earth Fund and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. All hope to leverage their investments into strategies that will keep the planet from heating up. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
As cold and flu season approaches, the U.S. faces a shortage of a common drug for the second year in a row. Liquid amoxicillin is the most prescribed antibiotic in the country, and although most viral illnesses common this time of year do not respond to antibiotics, amoxicillin and similar drugs fight secondary infections that are caused by the bacteria.
There are alternatives that we can use in almost all cases. And so it's not like we're going into this with absolutely no options. Sometimes they're a little stronger. Sometimes they might cause more side effects. And so that's why amoxicillin has been a go-to for us for many decades.
Most amoxicillin manufacturers are still in production but have the medication on allocation, meaning customers can only order a limited amount. And this means that pharmacies could run out quickly.
Well, as we take a look at what's going on over the next few days, it's all about a warming trend. After that chilly weekend that we experienced for the inland areas and a cool one for the coast, we'll be about 5 to 10 degrees warmer on Tuesday than we were today for the inland areas. And while it may be less of a headline, we'll be about 2 to 4 degrees warmer for the coastal areas. So in San Diego, a bit of a bump, but the most significant rise will be in inland areas. Let's take a look at these reservoir levels as we have inherited some great news from last winter. That rain and snow surplus, and yes, they had a little smidge of snow this past weekend. In places like the Sierras. So we're running above average here. This is great news. What a contrast compared to a year ago. 100% would be totally average here. And you can see we're running with the Castaic Reservoir around 113% of average, so 13% above where we would typically be here in early October. And we're doing really well in many other areas. Oroville, 137% of average, and Folsom, about 135% of the norm for early October. That's good news. Tonight, 59 degrees in the city, and Futurecast is going to show just a really few clouds. It's going to be a bright day tomorrow, maybe a few clouds in the morning along the coast, but that's it. So a lot of sunshine. These clouds will be very transient with this current pattern, and we're on the road to 74 into San Diego, and coastal areas ranging from 74 to 76, and inland areas are going to be a little bit warmer than this, but there will be a pretty big rise, and a significant temperature trend here is up. And so I really wanted to preserve some time for the 5-day forecast here, the 4 of them that we show, because we're going to gain about 10 degrees for the coast for Thursday into Friday compared to where we will be on Tuesday. Inland areas rising from 80 to 93. It's going to get hot later this week. 95 into Saturday. Into the mountains we go from 57 up into the upper 60s, about a 10-degree rise from Tuesday to Saturday. And the deserts, we're flirting with 100 again on Friday, 99 degrees for your high. So it's going to be a big rise after the cool down that we experienced, as it's a big flip-flop with the trough in the west to the ridge in the east. We're going to trade spots once again this weekend.
Over the weekend, La Jolla Playhouse held the world premiere of Sumo, a play that takes you into an elite training facility in Tokyo. And KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando went behind the scenes for a rehearsal to learn more about this traditional Japanese sport.
Sumo is a battle of giants with its origin dating back some 2,000 years.
It comes from mythology, right? Of Shinto mythology, of the gods.
James Yagashi serves as the cultural and martial arts advisor for La Jolla Playhouse's Sumo.
There's tremendous ritual involved, many Shinto rituals. Additionally, these were men, back in the, 1600s, where society was still very much a feudal and warrior society. People would carry swords regularly. And so a lot of the rituals that we see in the dohyo, which is the ring, are abstractions of basically showing the opponent that you are unarmed, which is, of course, why they only have basically a mawashi, which is a glorified loincloth, so to speak. And they're naked otherwise, and they spread their arms, they show that they've got nothing. And it's just a sheer competition of strength.
And Japanese-American playwright Lisa Sanae Dring fell in love with sumo.
I was so entranced by the idea or the feeling of a sport being so powerful and so ferocious and so wild, and then also so restrained and so filled with ceremony and honor.
That sense of ritual is even apparent in the rehearsal room.
This is a universe where we bow before we go into the rehearsal room, everybody, and we take our shoes off for, there's a part of the stage we can't wear shoes in because it's where they fight, but also it's very Japanese to take your shoes off when you enter a space. We're a mixed cultural room.
We have a taiko drummer who provides this wonderful sort of soundscape with the movements that we're doing.
Movements that the cast had to learn.
So I wanted to make sure that the actors got plenty of time to get familiar with, living in their lower half of their body. In warm-ups before rehearsal, we've spent a lot of time on the kind of exercises that the sumo wrestlers actually do.
Sometimes there's a ton, like a literal ton of power when you do the math on two bodies hitting each other like that, that's there. And so that is hopefully what we are portraying to the audience of how strong
these men are.
Sanae Dring wanted to create a space where Asian men could lead with strength and where the topic would not be racism or victimization.
And so in this play, it leads with, oh, that's not the conversation here. We are not having to prove our masculinity, the men on stage and the people on stage are not having to prove their masculinity because it's not challenged, which I feel like in many conversations in the theater right now, whiteness is assaulting some parts of Asianness.
The sumo ring is an omnipresent reminder of what's driving the characters in the play.
I wanted to tell the story of someone who is rising to power inside of a structured hierarchy, who's also challenging that hierarchy, and then is also so changed by the system which he is in that he doesn't know who he is at the end of it. So it's like, what is it to completely revolutionize your mindset from being an entity unto oneself into a part of this machine? And that's also Japanese culture as well.
Which is why Yagashi's knowledge of sumo was key.
First and foremost, I'm interested in trying to capture sort of iconic images of what we see as sumo. But then in addition to that, there's sort of the theatrical element of how do we then make these images, these rituals or movements interesting in a theatrical setting.
You know, it's not a bar fight. A sumo wrestling match is not that. And so I think in any sport, there looks like a dance involved, even if it's a dance of besting one another.
Audiences do not need to know anything about sumo before coming to the play, but they might leave with a greater appreciation of an ancient Japanese sport.
The primary intention is not to teach people about the sport. It is to illuminate humanity inside of this sport.
Sanae Dring takes us inside the world of sumo to create a powerful image of Asian men that we do not often see on the American stage. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. With October now upon us, NPR's Morning Edition is getting in the Halloween spirit. They have an interview with film director Jordan Peele about all things horror. And KPBS Midday Edition is talking about alternatives to $6 gas, including a discussion on the latest EV and hydrogen car technologies. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.